He heard me say that I couldn't love a man who earned less than me, and now I can't find a man at all. I didn't mean for those words to shape my life. I didn't mean for them to echo back at me in the form of empty Friday nights and half-hearted swipes through dating apps filled with men who couldn't meet my gaze, let alone my standards. But they did. It all started with him, Daniel. The man I loved, the man I thought would always be there. He had been standing right behind me at that party, drink in hand, listening as I laughed and declared my truth to my friends. If a man makes less than me, I just can't respect him. Love? Please. I need a partner, not a project. The words tasted bold, intoxicating, like the expensive champagne in my glass. My friends had giggled, nodding in agreement, the clink of their glasses punctuating my declaration. And Daniel? He had smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached his eyes. I was too caught up in the moment to notice. A week later, he was gone. No long speech, no shouting match, no last-ditch effort to make me see my mistake. Just a note left on the kitchen counter, concise, devastating. I heard you. At first, I brushed it off. He'd come back. He loved me. We had history, passion, chemistry. One argument, one misunderstanding, wouldn't break us. But he didn't come back. And what's worse, neither did anyone else. It was as if those words had cursed me. At first, I chalked it up to bad luck. Maybe I just wasn't meeting the right men. Maybe I was being too picky. But then, the whispers started. It turned out, Daniel wasn't the only one who had heard me that night. And in a city where connections matter, my words had traveled faster than I could have ever imagined. Now, when I walked into a bar or sat down for a date, there was always a knowing look, a smirk, a comment that cut just a little too deep. So, am I rich enough for you? Are we splitting the bill, or should I pretend to be worthy? The worst part? The men who could match my success, the ones I should have been drawn to, looked at me with something even colder than rejection, amusement. Like they knew something I didn't. And then, one night, I found out why. I found out on a night that was supposed to be like any other. I had nearly given up on dating. Every conversation felt like a test I didn't even know I was taking, and every man seemed to already have an opinion of me before I had the chance to prove them wrong. But that night, after too many lonely weekends, I let my friend Sienna drag me to an upscale lounge, one of those places where the men wore tailored suits with effortless ease and the women dripped in quiet luxury. That's where I saw him. Elliot Carter. Sharp jaw, confident stride, the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he owned it. His watch alone probably cost more than my monthly rent, and the way he looked at me, like he was assessing me, sent a thrill up my spine. Maybe, just maybe, my luck was about to change. "You're Victoria, right?" he said, taking the seat next to me at the bar. His voice was smooth, a blend of amusement and something else, something unreadable. "You know me?" I asked, surprised but flattered. He smirked. "Oh, everyone knows you." My stomach twisted, but I forced a casual smile. "That's so? And what exactly do they know?" Elliot leaned in slightly, just enough for his cologne to mix with the scent of whiskey between us. "They know what you said. About men. About money. About what you can and can't love." My heart pounded against my ribs. "That was a joke," I lied smoothly. His gaze didn't waver. "Sure. But it's funny how jokes tend to follow you." I swallowed hard. "I don't see why it matters. Plenty of women have standards." "It's not about your standards, sweetheart," he said, swirling the ice in his glass. "It's about what happened after." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Elliot glanced around the room, as if making sure we were alone in this crowded place. Then, with a lazy smirk, he said the words that turned my world inside out. "Daniel made sure no one worth your time would ever want you again." The room spun. I gripped the bar, my nails digging into the wood. "What are you talking about?" Elliot chuckled, low and knowing. You really don't know, do you? He leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. After you humiliated him, Daniel didn't just leave. He made sure you'd pay for it. I forced myself to breathe, to steady my shaking hands. That doesn't make sense. How could he? Elliot lifted a brow. You think men like us don't talk? I could only stare at him, my throat dry. See, Daniel's well connected. More than you ever realized, Elliot continued. And when a man like him wants revenge, he doesn't need to raise his voice. He just makes sure the right people hear the right things. I felt sick. What did he say? Elliot's smirk widened. That you see men as nothing but a paycheck. That you measure their worth by their wallets. That you'd trade love for a luxury handbag without a second thought. And the best part? He took a slow sip of his drink, letting the moment drag. You proved him right. The words hit me like a slap. No, that wasn't true. That wasn't who I was. But then, like puzzle pieces falling into place, I saw it, the way every man I had met in the last year looked at me with either disdain or amusement. The way my name had become a whispered joke among the very circles I had once hoped to belong to. My stomach twisted in horror. That's why no one takes you seriously, Elliot finished for me. Why they play with you, lead you on, make you think you've got a chance, before leaving you in the dust. Because to them, you're not a woman to be loved. His gaze locked onto mine, sharp and ruthless. You're a lesson to be learned. I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel had done this to me. He had turned my own words into a curse, into a weapon. And worst of all, I had handed it to him myself. I pushed my drink away, suddenly nauseous. I needed air. I needed to think. But as I stood, Elliot caught my wrist, his grip firm but not unkind. Careful, Victoria, he murmured, eyes glinting with something dangerously close to pity. You might have standards, but now? You're the one who doesn't make the cut. His words followed me out the door, into the cold night, and down the empty streets. And for the first time in my life, I realized. I had finally become the woman no man wanted. I didn't remember getting home. My head swam with Elliot's words, his smug voice playing on a loop. You're not a woman to be loved. You're a lesson to be learned. I paced my apartment, hands shaking, my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window almost unrecognizable. I had spent so long wondering what was wrong with me, why every man treated me like I was some kind of game they had already won. And now, I had my answer. Daniel had orchestrated this. The man I had once loved had built a quiet, perfect revenge. He hadn't needed to scream, hadn't needed to expose me in any grand betrayal. No, he had done something far worse. He had made me invisible. I sank onto my couch, my mind racing. I had to fix this. Somehow. I grabbed my phone. I had deleted Daniel's number long ago, but my fingers moved instinctively, searching my contacts, my emails, anything. When that failed, I scrolled through social media. His profile was gone. Private, locked away from my reach, just like my own reputation. Frustration burned inside me. You think men like us don't talk? Elliot's words had made it clear, this wasn't just about Daniel. It was bigger. It was calculated. And if I wanted answers, I had to start somewhere. I tapped out a message to the only person who might still know how to find him. Me, Sienna, I need to talk to you. It's about Daniel. She responded almost instantly. Sienna, this isn't a good idea. I clenched my jaw. Me, I don't care. Where is he? A long pause. Then. Sienna, he's back in town. But trust me, you don't want to see him. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. Me, why? This time, the pause stretched longer. Sienna, because he's not the same person you remember. A chill ran down my spine. Daniel had always been sharp, confident, charming. But Sienna's words carried a weight I didn't understand. Me, what do you mean? Sienna, meet me tomorrow. I'll explain everything. I stared at the screen, 1,000 possibilities racing through my mind. But none of them prepared me for what I was about to uncover. Because Daniel hadn't just left me behind. He had rebuilt himself into someone I no longer recognized. And whatever he had done to me was only the beginning. The next evening, I met Sienna at an intimate rooftop bar downtown. It was one of those places where the lights were dim, the drinks were expensive, and the atmosphere hummed with quiet exclusivity. She was already there when I arrived, nervously twirling the straw in her cocktail. When she saw me, she sighed. "V, you should let this go." I slid into the seat across from her, my heart pounding. "I can't. You said Daniel isn't the same." "What does that mean?" Sienna hesitated. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice. "He's different now. He's powerful. And he doesn't forgive." I scoffed. "He's a financial analyst. Not a mob boss." But Sienna didn't smile. "That's what you think." She reached into her bag and pulled out a glossy event invitation. My stomach dropped when I saw the name embossed in gold at the top. Daniel Pierce. The man I once loved, the man I had broken, was hosting a high-profile business gala. A networking event. A power event. A place where all the men who had been quietly shutting me out would be. "You don't get it, do you?" Sienna said, watching the blood drain from my face. "Daniel isn't just back. He's controlling the people who control everything. The people you used to date. The ones you wanted to be with. They don't just avoid you, V. They answer to him now." My fingers clenched around the invitation. "So what? He's rich now. That's supposed to scare me?" Sienna exhaled, frustrated. "It's not just about money. He made sure that no man in his circle would ever take you seriously again. And now? He's the one deciding who gets a seat at the table. Not just in business, socially, politically. You're blacklisted, V. And it's all because of him." My skin burned. My ears rang. I had underestimated him. This wasn't a petty act of revenge. This was systematic. A carefully built empire of influence. And I had been so busy licking my wounds that I hadn't even realized how deep the cut went. Sienna hesitated. "I shouldn't tell you this, but Daniel's been seeing someone." I went cold. "Who?" She licked her lips, glancing away. "Her name is Madeline Calloway. She's old money, high society. The kind of woman who was born into the world you wanted to be part of. They say he's going to propose." Madeline Calloway. I knew that name. Everyone did. She wasn't just a socialite. She was a statement. The kind of woman whose presence alone elevated a man to a different level of power. A woman who had everything I didn't. A woman who had replaced me. Something dark coiled inside me, something I didn't want to name. I set my drink down. "Where's the gala?" Sienna's eyes widened. "V. Where is it?" She hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she slid the second invitation toward me. "You can't just walk in there," she warned. "Daniel's not the man you remember. He's ruthless now. If he sees you." I met her gaze, my voice calm but unwavering. "Good," I said. "Let him see me." I stood, invitation in hand, my mind already racing with possibilities. I was done being invisible. Daniel thought he had buried me, erased me from his world. He had no idea that I had just found a way back in. And this time? I wasn't playing by his rules. I walked into the gala like I belonged there. The room was a masterpiece of wealth and power, chandeliers casting golden light over men in perfectly tailored suits and women draped in quiet luxury. Every conversation hummed with influence, every glance measured. And in the center of it all stood Daniel. He looked different. Sharper. He wore his success like armor, his posture unshakable, his smile slow and calculated. Beside him, Madeline Calloway was perfection. Tall, poised, the very definition of untouchable grace. When she laughed at something he whispered in her ear, the sight burned through me like acid. I had walked in believing I was here to confront him. To win. I never realized I had already lost. It started the moment our eyes met. Daniel didn't flinch. Didn't look shocked. He smirked. Like he had been waiting for this exact moment. A shiver ran down my spine. Something was wrong. Then I heard the whispers. That's her. God, she actually showed up. Desperate. I turned my head slightly, my pulse spiking. The way people were looking at me, it wasn't curiosity. It was amusement. And then, Elliot Carter appeared at my side, glass in hand, his expression smug. You shouldn't have come, he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. I forced a smile. Why? Afraid I'll remind everyone of the truth? Elliot chuckled. Oh, sweetheart. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. The truth is exactly why you're here. I barely had a second to process his words before the first phone screen lit up. Then another. And another. I glanced around, confusion tightening my chest. A few women gasped. A few men laughed, shaking their heads. Then I saw it. On every glowing screen, my own face stared back at me. A video. A recording from that night, the night that started everything. If a man makes less than me, I just can't respect him. Love? Please. I need a partner, not a project. The laughter. The clinking glasses. My arrogance. It wasn't just my words. It was the way I said them. The way I sneered. The way I rolled my eyes, as if love itself was a joke. Someone had sent it to everyone in this room. A deep, sickening dread settled in my stomach. I turned back to Daniel. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was whispering something to Madeline, his hand resting lightly on her waist, his expression unreadable. But I knew. I had walked into his world thinking I could rewrite the narrative. Instead, he had been waiting for me. And he had just delivered the final blow. The whispers grew louder. I took a step back. Then another. I needed to leave. I turned on my heel and walked, ran, toward the exit. But before I reached the doors, I heard Elliot's amused voice behind me. Checkmate. I left the city a week later. There was nothing left for me. Every door I knocked on remained closed. Every date, every opportunity, every attempt to rebuild my reputation, destroyed before I could even try. Daniel had won. And I had no choice but to disappear. As I drove away, I looked back one last time at the skyline that had once been mine. I had played the game. And I had lost. Forever.